Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson, and I'm back to host this episode. And it is a two-man episode tonight, but usually the two-man has been Scott and Joris, but actually it's going to be me and Scott tonight. Unfortunately, Joris can't be with us. No coincidence that Genk lost 3-0 to Standard Liège, and Joris just suddenly can't be here. Scott, what do you reckon?
Are you suggesting Joris is in the huff? I know that'll have been a doubly sore one for him. I mean, losing is never nice, but he's not the biggest fans of Standard for reasons for those of you who follow your Belgian football closely will be well aware of. But yeah, really poor performance by his side this weekend. Although that is not the reason he's not with us, but I can see why you think it is.
I'll leave it up to the listeners to decide on that one for sure. Plenty to talk about, to be fair, even without Joris. We've got a lot to get through this evening. I'll quickly run through the results from the weekend. Cercle Brugge ironically beat Ghent after last week when we were like, I think Scott, I don't know if you said it or if you mentioned it in the chat that Dante Van Zee is the forgotten man, and then he pops up with the goal against his former club to give Cercle a massive 3 points. That is a really, really big 3 points. Dender lost 4-1 to St. Truden. That has had an impact on their managerial situation. We will talk about that in a little bit. Club beat Leuven 2-1. Leuven missed a penalty in that one. What could have been for them, that would have been a massive point if they could have escaped there. Union beat Antwerp by 2-1 at home as well, but they suffered a huge injury blow, which again, we will talk about because it could have an impact on the title race. As we mentioned, Standard Liège, they beat Genk 3-0. Mechelen beat Raal 2-0 away from home. Great result for them, to be honest, to get things back on track with that hunt for the top six. Anderlecht somehow beat Zonterwagen 4-2. Zonterwagen had about 5,000 shots in this game and just couldn't score. Well, they scored two, but it took them forever to score those two. They had so many chances. And I don't know, I came out of that game thinking, I think this team might actually be okay because they can create lots of chances. But I was also like, they're on a horrendous run of form, and maybe that's the problem. Westerlo, they got a big win against Charleroi, who they've completely fallen off a cliff. Since that cup defeat, that's really, really completely thrown them. They lost 2-1, as I said, away to Westerlo. Let's start then, not in the Pro League at all. We're going to start the Challenger Pro League because we just felt it was fitting that a side getting promoted this early in the season deserves to kind of move their way from the back end of the episode to the front end of the episode. So we're going to talk about Beveren, Scott. A couple of Steph Peters' own goals were quite helpful. A Molenbeek late equaliser against Beerschot was also helpful, but it was a matter of when, not if, wasn't it, that this team was going to get promoted. Beveren still unbeaten this season. Fantastic way to get back into the top flight. Still hunting for the league as well. And it's amazing because we started this podcast when they were in the top flight. We had a really good relationship with Anton Gobin, obviously, who people remember who was working there at Beveren at the time. And it's really interesting to kind of see his vision for the club and kind of where he wanted them to go. And we've obviously been keeping up with Anton this whole time. He's now moved on to pastures new to the south of France. I'm sure he's having a lovely time down there, a beautiful part of the world to be in. But you know that, and I know that he'd have been more than delighted to see Beveren get back up. He's got a massive soft spot for them, despite not being able to achieve the goals he wanted to achieve. But we spoke a couple of weeks ago about kind of the old players that they brought in, and I think they all deserve some credit, but we should probably talk a little bit more about the squad and reflect on the season there, because I have to say, you look at the team that's been put together there, and Bob Peters deserves a lot of credit for the work he's done in building that side and working with the manager as well to kind of create just an absolute machine, isn't it? It's just a machine that's completely steamrolled this league, and I can't remember a team dominating that league like this since Union did it. When they had Dante Van Zee, Dennis and Dev, they had like kind of the makeup of this team that was going to go on to kind of compete for titles. Now, I'm not saying Beveren are going to go on and compete for a title next season and set those expectations, but if a team can dominate the second tier like this in Belgium, you usually predict that they're going to come up and be able to survive quite comfortably, potentially kind of mix it into the middle. And you're looking at a team like Beveren, and I think that's always been their ambition, isn't it, to be a stable Pro League team. And they've got the things in place to do that. They've got obviously some older players with experience. They've still got some players in the prime, like Victor Boone, like someone like that is only 28. A couple of the signings that I want to talk about as well. But I know you've obviously watched a lot more than I have this year. And what what's your reflection on this achievement for them, and kind of looking ahead to the summer and next season? Like, how excited are you to see them back and kind of see what they can do?
Well, it's the earliest promotion in second tier history. So it's history setting for a start, and of course they've now got the objective of aiming to get through the remaining 8 games unbeaten, which would be, a hell of a statement to make. It's been a bit of a painful journey, really, for Beveren. I mean, when we started the BFP, as you were saying there, back in I suppose 2020, actually it'll be now. Tail end of 2021, obviously Beveren were relegated in our first season, doing the podcast under a certain Nicky Hyan, who was there at the time, and that cost him his job as well. And they've gone very, very close to kind of coming back as well. They were very unlucky a few years ago and missing out in the final day of the season, and losing out by a point. During that season when only one side could come up as well. So they probably should have been promoted before now, but back after a 5-year gap. And when you consider that they were Pro League regulars for the previous 9 seasons before their relegation, I mean, this is a side that do belong at the Pro League level. And it's worth reminding those who don't know, they've done things as well. They've won a couple of titles, 79 and 84. So they are a club with a pedigree. And when they were initially relegated, they were still spending kind of quite large sums of money for what were a Challenger Pro League side at that time. Of course, they were purchased not long before their relegation by the American multi-club group, the Bolt Football Holdings, who own Den Haag and Estoril and Brøndby. And for the first couple of years after relegation, they were investing quite heavily, actually. They were spending and making losses that really you don't want to incur at that level. And it got to a point where, obviously they weren't able to get promoted again. So they had to start cutting costs and changing their strategy a little bit. And they've been operating on a budget that's probably about a third of the size of what it was after those first couple of years after relegation as well. I've just done really well, in truth. You mentioned Antoine, who's a good friend of this podcast, of course. It's worth highlighting that before Antoine left Beveren, I think he did a lot in terms of laying the groundworks for this return, to be fair. And it's worth highlighting that, he has a real role to play in the legacy of the return as well. He was pretty instrumental in the appointment of both Bob Peters and in T1 Marink Riedijk as well, who, to be fair, there probably was some doubts about when he first arrived, because despite having a proven track record of working with young players, it's not quite the same thing working with young players at Nearpede as it is to, developing young players in the environment that Beveren are operating. Very different facilities, quite a different setup. So in many ways that was a brave appointment, and initially obviously it didn't work out for them. He missed out at his first attempt. They had a great summer, prepared really well, and have just stormed the league, to be honest. Played 24, won 21, yet to lose a game. Free scoring, scored 53, and they've only conceded 17. So this season's really been built on a really solid defence. You mentioned Victor Boone, but Bruno Godot's in there as well. He's a pretty experienced defender. Certainly more than good enough for Challenger Pro League level. But there are other players in there worth mentioning. There's plenty of quality, a nice mix of quality and experience. Guillaume de Schrijver, Chris Lukeza, Christian Bruls, now 37. He's going to get what looks like at least another year back in the top flight. Be interesting to see how he handles that, because we've seen players at the real tail end of their career perform okay at the top flight. Worth a shout out to Kurt Abrahams as well. He's their second top scorer. Who else is in there? Obviously Leonard Mertens, the top scorer. He's got 26 in 42. since he came in from Dender and is their top scorer with 12, and he'll be really delighted in getting a kind of crack at top flight football. I think it'll be really interesting to see what he can do, because his profile as a striker matches what a lot of clubs go for. He's quite a big physical striker. He's decent in the air. He's got a good eye for goal. His all-round game is good, and he's quite well equipped for the physical side of the game in Belgium and in the top flight as well. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see how he handles that, and just how they handle their business, I think, over the summer now. Are they going to spend a little bit more, or are they going to stick with what they've got? They obviously brought in a new striker not too long ago, I think, who obviously was clearly had one eye on next season, and challenging Leonard Mertens as well. So many things there to be positive about. Worth a shout out as well to current CEO Bart Foubert, who was already at the club before Antoine left, and kind of stepped into that role after mentoring Antoine, been mentored by him for a while, and financial director Brandon de Klerk as well, who's done a really good job there. I mean, this is a club who they've changed their operating model slightly, and what they've achieved on a smaller budget is quite incredible, and it does just show you as what's possible. That's one of my cats singing Beveren's praises in the background, if you can hear that distantly. I'm in a different room this week, and the cats have decided to join me, so if you hear them, it's all good. So they've been liberated, really, I suppose. That's how I'd kind of describe it, because I think the Beveren fan base, Ben, were probably getting to the point where they were getting quite exasperated and never thought this was going to happen. This season was going so well, and I think we knew it was going to happen this year, but there was a lot of simmering frustration and some anger about the ownership up until this season as well. And it's amazing what happens when you start winning, how quickly people kind of pipe down and forgive maybe past mistakes. But it's great to see them back, because I do think they belong at this level, and lots of people will feel that way about it. I just hope they can go and finish off this season unbeaten, because I think they deserve to do that, and I think it'd be a great shame if they didn't.
Yeah, no, you can understand like 5 years in that league with the kind of budget they had been having. And some of the, like, in my opinion, the year they should have gone up was the year they had Tierno Barry. Like that was the year they were easily the second best team behind Molenbeek. Like those two teams should have both gone up, and in other seasons that team would have gone up because of the way the league worked and stuff like that. It's just the problem with the Challenger can be, because the format can change so quickly. You don't actually, like, you could be the second best team, but the format denies you getting promoted because you have to go through the playoffs, or you don't even go through the playoffs or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So it can change quite quickly. But yeah, just a couple more players to add that you've mentioned. Dante Rigo obviously came in. He's had experience with Beerschot. Jannis van Heck, always thought he was quite a decent player in the central midfield, former Mechelen and Zoltavaga man. A couple of contracts expiring, players like Van Heck, from what I can see, 2026, and there's a couple of other guys 2026. I don't know what's kind of happened there, but I'm sure they'll kind of finalise some of them. But the kind of, you mentioned one of the Kurt Abrahams. I've always been a fan of Kurt Abraham since his Westerlo days. I always thought he potentially could make the step up, but he never really did. He's quite small, so like you'd always kind of worry about him physically at the top flight, whether his like diminutive stature would kind of affect him. So I'll be really interested to see how he gets on if he hangs around next season as well. But I think the signing of the season for them has to be Yoel Margarita, the Curacao international that they signed. 24 games, 6 goals, 9 assists from out wide. Only 25 years old. Came in from, what's the name? Phoenix Rising, I think it was, from the American kind of, I guess you could call it second division, but I really don't understand the footballing tiers in America. But he's obviously Dutch born, as far as I'm aware, but qualifies to play for Curacao at the national team. Should potentially go to the World Cup this year. I believe he has been part of the squad quite regularly. So what a season for him, winning the league, potentially going unbeaten and getting to go to a World Cup. Like, fantastic. And I feel like we could be talking a lot more about him next season in the Pro League. And I can imagine if he performs anywhere near as well as he's played in the CPL, there'll be teams looking at him like we had with like Adnan Abid and some of these other guys, some of these wingers that have come through from the second tier that people like. But he also had a time in Azerbaijani football with Sabak FK. I think he spent like a season there after leaving Dutch football. So it's always interesting to see kind of how he's now ended up in the Belgian top flight. And yeah, great signing from the club to get him in. Obviously, Kortrijk are looking to join them. They'll be hoping that can happen sooner rather than later, but obviously they still need to kind of build the gap to Beerschot, who have dropped away a little bit. So I'm pretty kind of I'm 80% confident that Kortrijk will be the other team that get promoted. They just have to not mess things up to win us. So they should be coming back up, and then it's the playoffs, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But congratulations from everyone here to Beveren. It'd be great to see you guys back. Hopefully, we'll finally make our way over there. Although it seems a bit poor of us to only do it now that they've got back into the top flight, doesn't it, Scott? It feels like we've kind of been neglectful in that sense, unfortunately. Moving on from Beveren, let's go to the other end of football, I guess you could say. Let's talk a little bit Champions League football. Club Brugge, obviously, when we were recording last week, we were in one of the best games of Champions League football that anyone's got to witness. That home tie against Atletico Madrid, that was insane. Just goals. It was like proper vintage Champions League football. Unfortunately, they got lost 4-1 to Atletico yesterday evening as of recording. A harsh scoreline. I think most people admit it was a harsh scoreline. I think it was just one of those where, as they pushed, they conceded more goals, with Sorloth obviously scoring a couple late on, and Club were creating chances and they played quite well. And I think it's nice to see kind of some frustration from the players and disappointment from the players, because it shows that the expectations are there, that it's not just, you're not just turning up to just turn up. Do you know what I mean? You're turning up to compete. And I think it's cheesy probably and cheap to say, but you look at what Bodo Glimt did to Inter Milan, and you're kind of now, every other team in Europe is being like, hang on a minute, like if this team can just build a team based basically from where they are, like they just develop young Norwegian talent. And I mean, but it's an interesting story anyway, because obviously lots of those players left the club. Hugo Vetlessen's a Bodo Glimt kind of player that developed at Bodo Glimt, who hasn't quite done what we'd hoped he'd do at Club Brugge. Maybe he ends up going back, because they've all gone back. Jens Peter Hauge obviously did nothing at Ghent. He's gone back and he scores goals against Inter Milan. He played for AC Milan, did nothing at AC Milan. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's an interesting story, but they've shown that it can be done. And I think Club have also shown that it can be done. They've been really competitive in Champions League football in recent seasons. And yeah, I don't know what you thought of it, Scott, but I was like, there's no shame in losing to Atletico Madrid. There's definitely no shame in losing to Atletico Madrid away from home, but it's nice to see that we're disappointed that they did lose, because we felt that they could have won. And that's such a different kind of situation to what we've been in just since we started this podcast as well. Like, we've never had much hope of doing Belgian clubs doing anything in the Champions League, and now we're looking at Club. We saw Union do it a couple of times as well. Like, but Club especially, because they've got the experience, you expect them to be able to hang with teams and beat teams at home. Still need to learn a little bit away from home, but I think it was a successful campaign. Maybe not as successful as it was last season in terms of kind of the results and stuff, but it still felt like a good Champions League campaign from them so far.
Yeah, they pushed them quite hard in the end, and actually, they gave them a right good game. I think Atletico knew they were in a game, that's for sure, and you can't ask for much more than that. I think what ultimately let them down, and I think this is probably the big lesson for them, is that at this level, their defence still isn't really good enough. This tie kind of highlighted that, really. Within the league phase, obviously, you can do okay, but when it comes to playing some of the elite sides at the knockout stage, particularly, then that's when you are going to get exposed. I know that Brandon Mekala came in for kind of quite a lot of criticism, I think, after last night. Rightly or wrongly, I think it's just the defence at this level isn't really strong enough. But from a defensive perspective, they certainly gave them a game, and they put everything into it, I think, and you can't ask for much more than that. In the end, financially, obviously, they've done incredibly well. Their second best performance, not quite as good as last year, obviously, because they got a stage further, which meant more money, but their second best performance financially in the Champions League, just a little bit over, I think, 50 million earned. So that alone is going to finance a summer war chest, you would imagine. and is going to keep them financially ahead of all other Belgian sides. So the mere fact that they've remained a consistent Champions League side for the best part of the last decade has just proven its worth again, both in terms of what you're able to do financially, but also attracting players as well. So they're exactly where they want to be from that perspective going into next season as well. They'll be disappointed in a way, I think, just because um, to go out there and to leave everything on the pitch as you would want and to kind of lose ultimately is always disappointing. And they're playing an Atletico side who actually, when they came into this time and they were coming into the first leg, there was a little bit of nerves at the Spanish end of things because of and I spoke about this last week and also did a guest slot on a rather large Atletico podcast where I was highlighting the fact that the club have actually got a very decent record against them. That's changed now, and it was always going to at some point, but the numbers coming into the tie were in club's favour, and I think they needed to hold on to that. But yeah, they played reasonably well over the tie. And at that level, we know it comes down to details, particularly defensive details, and what you do with your transitions. And ultimately, they've come off second best.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that one. It's just, yeah, a shame it ended the way it ended. I thought even when it was 2-1 to Atletico in the second leg, I thought, oh, maybe they can nick a goal here, they can grab something. But if you don't take your chances, unfortunately, that is what happens to you at this level. But hey, they should be back there next season, hopefully. It really just depends, I guess, on the outcome in the Pro League. And I mean, they've been dealt a massive boost, haven't they, Scott, in their kind of hopes for the title. Obviously, at the weekend, most people probably would have seen that Promise David was stretchered off after a collision with Dan Foulon, accidental collision, like nothing kind of to suggest that Foulon did anything like untoward. It was just a normal footballing incident, I guess you could say. And Union kind of he said went off a test, and it looked like actually they weren't too concerned. Like they thought he'd be out for some time, but they didn't think it was too bad. But then it's transpired that it's really bad. And looks like David might be out for the rest of the season and potentially miss the World Cup. And that's that one I find really hard to stomach. Just you just have to think for a player missing the World Cup in any year, like any year is bad because it's every 4 years. You don't get the chance to play at the World Cup that often. You could be absolutely stinking it up in 4 years' time and not even have a look in. But what makes it worse is obviously Canada are hosting and he'll get to play for his nation hosting a World Cup. And I can't imagine there's anything more incredibly special than that, considering he's come from like where he's come from, just like obviously ripping it up in Estonia. Probably didn't think he was going to make it to the World Cup even when he was doing that, and then goes to Union. It's just incredible for Union. Agrees to stay for one more season, probably with the idea that he would get this move this summer. They'd obviously had the World Cup as well, so that I don't know whether it really works like that anymore. Like I feel like it did. It used to like good World Cup used to really boost your value. I just don't feel like that's the case as much as it used to be these days. I think so much scouting is being done anyway that most of the players at the World Cup are known quantity for most clubs. But either way, it would have been nice for him to kind of announce himself a little bit more at the World Cup because I mean the way he plays, he probably would have come up with some goals. Like that's just the Promise David way. But he's out. Looks like Florich is also out for a long time. Kevin Rodriguez has been out, so he's going to be missing for a little bit. And suddenly it's looking really light up top for Union, isn't it, Scott? You're starting to get concerned as to, like, even with their great kind of the way they recruit and everything like that, they always have a plan B, but you're looking into plan C, D. Like, yes, Mr. Smith is going to have to do some more. The Brazilian is probably going to have to play a little bit more up front. He has been playing up wide, but maybe he goes more centrally. A couple of the other guys might have to transition a little bit into playing as a striker. El Hadj could play maybe slightly further next to a full, like another player to support them. Fuseni at least is around, so if you can get Fuseni back and firing, there's a lot kind of riding on his shoulders. But it's a massive boost for Club Brugge, and I think it'd be wrong to not consider that like as a factor in denting Union's title hopes because all three of those players have scored goals, and all three of those players, like Rodriguez especially, just has had a fantastic season. He's been so much better than he's been in the past. David, we know what David can do. Florent as well has been pretty good when he was playing. Like he looked like a good signing. So yeah, it's concerning, and this is David Hubert's biggest test, isn't it? Now, like this is your like how good are you tactically to kind of get what you can out of this team with so many injuries? But it does really shake things up, and yeah, I've seen lots of kind of newspapers in Belgium kind of saying because of how club played at home against Atletico, it's like you've got to back that up by trying coming back and winning the title because you've shown you can do it against them. You should be able to do it against, no offense, some of the teams in Belgium.
Yeah, this is a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, at the worst possible time as well. And my initial thoughts, actually, when the injury was confirmed, was does this now swing the title race, in club's favour? I know the St Truden fans behind us will be shouting, "Hey, hang on a minute, we're still in this conversation," and they very much are. We should highlight that they absolutely are, but. I think, you look at Promise David, 10 goals, 1 assist in 24. He's a top scorer. I mean, Rodriguez and Florix are both on 7, which is obviously not bad. But the question now is who's going to fill that gap, really? That's it, so they'll be looking at options because somebody needs to do that. I think they will take confidence from the fact that I think they know how to approach the playoffs now. I think obviously last season they proved that they'd really mastered what you have to do as a side if you're going to really compete for the title, and that's do the dirty stuff well, and be physically very competitive. And actually, it's more about the result really than the performance. Win your duels, win all of your physical battles, and be solid. And I think they can still do that. Um, Obviously, they have less options now, so there'll be lots of heads getting knocked together inside the Union camp, I suspect, trying to figure out tactically how they're going to approach this now. They've got a few weeks, obviously, before we get to the playoff stage yet. Not too far away now, but they've got time to really kind of figure out, I suppose, how they're going to approach this. But it is a potential game changer, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how they cope with it. Because, of course, this season as well has probably been the first year since the return where they haven't had one striker who really has not blitzed the place, not done very, very well, scored consistently. And I mean, 10 goals for Promise really isn't a bad return at all. I'm not being critical when I say that, but they've really struck gold consistently over the last few years with having strikers who've scored 12 or more at least throughout the season. They really have done very well. So this is the first season really where they've faced a challenge of this particular nature as well. And even from an injury perspective, they've also been consistently very good for a while too. So it's a bad injury at the worst possible moment, at a time when they're looking for the offensive parts of the team really to kind of do the business, and there's real question marks now. Because are they going to be able to adapt? I mean, they've shown they have to a certain extent. I mean, this season again, particularly the way they've been playing is, although not dissimilar, I think they've had to be a little bit more pragmatic than they have done in recent years as well. And they're going to have to do that again, I think, if they're going to have to do it. But this is Union that we're talking about as well. So part of me thinks, well, if anyone can still go on and really push right to the very end, despite some circumstances now working against them, it's going to be them, because they've proven that they can do it. But yeah, I'm really going to be fascinated to see how they approach this. And it's a confident club. I suspect they are probably not as worried about this as some of the external analysts actually are, and some of the mainstream media are. They'll have confidence that players in that squad can step up as well, and kind of share the load a little bit, because that's ultimately, I suppose, what has to happen if you can't find somebody to replace those goals. In a direct striking sense, then share the load, and that might be the solution here. And again, they've not been unlucky in that sense as well. Rob Scoof, since he's come in, has kind of contributed, I think, a little bit more than I expected him to, as well. That experience has become kind of quite important to them. But yeah, an interesting challenge, and certainly not one that they've faced before.
Yeah, like they've still got like yeah a lot of quality outside of that, haven't they? Like we just said, like you've mentioned Scoffs, Zorgan, uh, Kalili. Like I feel like Kalili could probably score more and create more. Like I think he's a really good player. But the numbers just don't really reflect how good and how much of an impact he actually does have on the game. I think so. It'd be interesting to see if he can step up a little bit. But yeah, you're talking Promise David, Kevin Rodriguez, and Ralph Roach all out. That's their three top scorers, like 9, 7, and 7, like you're saying. And it's like yeah, Scoops with 4. Um, Smith's got 2. Uh, I mean, I know what I'd do, and I don't know if they would want to do it, but I'd just stick big Rossi Sykes up front. To be honest, like he's great in the air, and he's actually really good at finishing with his feet. Like he can bang goals in. Like he's got 5 in his second season with the club. He's got 4 goals in 30 games this year. Like that, he's no mug in front of goal. So yeah, he's Footmob do that like player traits thing. If any of you use Footmob, just open up Rossi Sykes player traits because it's obviously like how much of a tendency they have to do these certain things compared to other players in their position. He attempts the most shots out of any central defender in the entire Pro League, and he scored 95%. He's in the top like 5% of goals for central defenders in the Pro League. 89% of his aerial duels he wins. He's also created. He's in like the top 9% for chances created as a central defender. Like the man's he's just incredible. I think he's massively underrated in that sense. And yeah, I couldn't get enough of Rossi Sykes. So just if you had to stick him up front, I reckon he could do a job because he's big, he's physical, he can edit, he can shoot. So if David Huber's listening, he is the man. If Alex is listening, mate, just tell David like this is the way forward. Stick like you could stick Chrissy Burgess up there with him if you want. Like I even think Kevin McAllister could probably do a job up front because he's just be an absolute pest. So yeah, give the defenders a go. That'd be my suggestion because I feel like they could probably do a job up there.
I've
Um,
always I really like Rossi Sykes' mentality. Actually, I think that's a massive factor in his success, just his general attitude, and I loved his reaction to the late winner as well. I think just tells its own story. You mentioned Fuseni actually. Obviously, I think there's a fair chance that the onus of responsibility will probably end on his shoulders to a certain extent as well. But somebody who's actually been forgotten about, Matteo Biondic, comes in from the lower tiers of German football, following a model that Union have gone after in a recruitment sense, and it hasn't really worked for him this season. Um, Question mark there about whether he might get an opportunity of any kind now, or whether they still feel it's kind of too early in a way for him, and he needs more time to kind of adapt. But opportunities arise when injuries like this happen. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I think Fuseni has the potential, I think, to go and score a few goals. I think the thing with him is he misses an awful lot of opportunities. What I've seen of him firsthand, and I remember seeing him at Ibrox when Rangers played them not too long ago. And he had a few opportunities that night that he should have had a couple of goals that night and didn't score. So I think he's a player who does have goals in him, but you look at his season, and he's only featured 8 times this season and not really done anything. This is, as you said it, and I think David Huber in a way is key here to a certain extent. It's his first major challenge as a coach. What does he do about this? Who does he go with? That could have a major difference either way, this choice, and where the title goes in the end. So we're about to find out, kind of quite how good David Huber is when up against it, I suppose.
yeah, I forgot about Beyondic, and it just that feels to me like it's written for him to just explode in the playoffs, doesn't it? Like that'd be so Union, just him just coming in and banging like 6 or 7 goals. But To be fair to Hubert, his time at Leuven will have massively prepared him for managing a team with no strikers. Although he had strikers there, they didn't score any goals, so he kind of understands that you got to be a little bit creative in terms of trying to get things in place. But yeah, if it's only like 11 goals in 44 games last season, like he showed that he can score. It's just he's got to be more efficient. Mark Geiger could obviously play up front as well, so they do have options. It's just it's not the guys that you're thinking of. They've also got Sekou Keita as well, the youngster. He could maybe have a couple more chances, like he's been on the bench a couple of times. Yeah, they can do something, that's for sure. It's just going to be really interesting to see how they do it. Um, and how much of an impact it has. And in a way, it's nice that they've got these couple of games before the playoffs start to kind of experiment a little bit with players and kind of working out a way that works, while also still probably having enough in the squad without some of those strikers to win a couple more games before the end of the season. So it's not panic stations. It's just an interesting thing to see. And yeah, good luck to Hubert and good luck to Union trying to kind of manage this. Someone else is going to have to start working out how to get Dender to score and somehow stay up, because Hakim Ilkon's been sacked today. Really appreciate Dender doing it as early as they did in the day to give us time, but the website press relief is probably one of the more disrespectful ones. Like normally when someone gets sacked, there's a little bit of fluff. Like even the West Brom guy Eric Ramsey, who's been terrible, got a bit of fluff to say like stuff. This was 3 sentences, which is we've sacked him. The technical staff will take over. Thank you. But the thank you's kind of like it's like in The Simpsons when Milhouse's dad gets fired, and it's like he's like, so that's it. After obviously not 20 years, it's probably like 20 games. That's it. So long. Good luck. And the guy's like, I don't remember saying good luck. Like it feels like that was probably the conversation that they had with him. I personally think this is I was going to say mental, but that's probably an overreaction. I mean, obviously, they've only won 3 out of 26 games this season. He's won 5 of his 23 that he was in charge, drawn 6, lost 12. Points per game of 0.91. We all said Evouard did a great job for them last season. He was only averaging he only just 1.1 points, and he won a couple more games, to be fair to him. I think obviously they lost Schiedler, they lost a couple of other players in the summer. We knew it was going to be difficult for them this season to kind of follow that up. The rumour is, and obviously we're talking rumour here, but it seems people seem quite confident that it's going to be Yannick Ferreira coming in to take over. I mean, surely his one job is just to win that playoff match, isn't it? Because they're 8 points behind Ral. Like the way Ral are going, they could probably catch them. They've obviously got this big game, as in Dender have a big game coming up with Cercle Bruges. Cercle have slightly turned things around, 2 wins in their last 5. A lot of pressure on Cercle going into that game, because if they win that, suddenly things look a lot different. And I wrote them off last week, and I think Joris kind of pushed back a little bit. He was like, oh, maybe I didn't see them beat Ghent, but they did, and that just it changes the kind of the situation down there. It looks like Real and Dender are probably set in there now with the kind of the points and the way things are going. Leuven and Cercle are the 2 teams fighting to get out. So if you're Dender, you're looking at the 8 points to Real, and if you can get that down to 3, get that down to 3 or 4, like suddenly everything changes. But do you think Ferreira? Like, I'm not. This isn't a slight on Ferreira. Do you think? I just don't see how anyone can come and do a better job than what Milcon's done, because I don't think they played bad football at all. Like I watched them play, and I was like, this team plays nice football. They don't have the talent, and there's nothing you can do about that. If you don't have the talent, you don't have the talent. Like they didn't get hammered. I never felt like they were getting hammered. Obviously, they did lose at the weekend 4-1 to St Truden, but St Truden are a good team. And in fairness to them, they were 1-0 up within a minute. So it's like some of those goals like came later in the game. Like it was 3-1 until near the end of the match. Only 2-1 at half time. Like Bruni and Simba goes off injured. That's really not helpful. Like I feel like it's a bit unfair, and I think we spoke about it before, and T kind of expanded it, Scott. That I feel like Milcon still gave them a chance of staying up via that playoff. But part of me is like, is that a good thing? Because then, like, do they have the capacity or the capability to push on next season and avoid another situation like this, or is it just going to be? Are you just going to be Wigan under Roberto Martinez that just kept staying up and they were really good at staying up, but eventually your number's going to get called? And like, yeah, it's fine. There's no problem with that. But like in the Belgian league, I feel like it's a little bit different to like being in the Premier League because it's just worth so much more. And it's like for Dender, it's like I think you're going to spend a bit more money to have to do that every year. So I'm not saying they should tank and deliberately go down, but it just seems interesting that they're willing to gamble at this point when it all seems that everything's just focused on one game. And it's like, is anyone going to be able to really turn things around drastically compared to what Milcom was actually doing?
I think the thing with this news for me is my initial reaction was, what do they expect? I mean, we're at the stage of the season now where they know the situation that they're in. They know the challenges that they face, and I think changing coach, does that radically change the margins possibly that they have of staying up? I think that's a big ask. That's a really big ask of them. I think you're right to highlight they didn't play bad football. I mean, for a side that have been, solidly bottom of the league for, the entire season, I think they started to play better football, making better to watch under Milcon. So I think he was probably, while not achieving results, I think the quality of the football improved. I think their efficiency obviously was still a big issue. They probably should have picked up a few more points than they have done, and did miss opportunities that they really shouldn't. So it's a bit of a double-edged thing, this. I think they're probably looking at this now and going, right, okay, we see the situation we're in. It's all about that playoff final. I think almost certainly now, as you say, kind of prepare for that, and on the basis of that, I think they've decided to make a change and go for a little bit more experience. So it's looking increasingly likely, as you were saying, Ben, it is going to be Yannick Ferreira. So he should be confirmed within the next few hours. By this time next week, he'll be there and ensconced unless something miraculous happens at the last minute. And Yannick Ferreira, obviously, no stranger to Belgian football, previously at Molenbeek. Came into Molenbeek, obviously, just to try and save them from relegation from the Pro League. Failed to do that. Of course, nobody really expected him to save them. High hopes he was going to help them bounce back at the first attempt, which hasn't happened. That cost him his job there. But he's also had spells at Beveren and Mechelen, and he's been at Standard, Charleroi, and of course he was responsible for bringing St Truden back up to the top flight in 2016 as well. So he has experience both of Pro League football, but also of a Challenger Pro League level, and of bringing sides back up. So I suppose they're thinking longer term, go and win that playoff final game if they can against whoever wins the playoffs in the Challenger Pro League, and hopefully preserve your status. And in the worst case scenario, they've got a coach who has good experience at Challenger Pro League level and has been promoted with a side before. So I kind of understand the choice. But as we were saying recently, nobody really knows how people are going to respond to the pressure of that craziest of fixtures, which is one of the best ones to look out for throughout the course of the season. I always think so anyway. So it's an interesting choice because the news only broke earlier on today. And my initial reaction was, well, it's probably going to be Bernd Storck. I mean, who do most people turn to in this situation? And I'm sure he was probably on the list. Of course, Yannick's free at the moment as well. He was at Zamalek most recently, and I think left there in November, I think. So he's been available for a few months now and has had a little break. So it does kind of make sense. Going to be really fascinating to see what he can do because, as we were saying, Hayek Milken had Dender playing some decent football, but that has to change, I think, tactically now, and I think that's probably part of their calculation. I've had a few hours to think about that, and the attempt to play a passing, free-flowing game, which I applaud, despite their situation. I suspect we're going to see them become a bit more pragmatic now, over the remaining few weeks. So I'm expecting them to be a little bit less easy on the eye, which is a shame. So prepare yourself for having to cover your eyes, everybody, if you're watching Dender over the next few weeks, because I think the style of play is going to change for the next couple of months or so. That's for sure. But yeah, as ever with any change like this, and when a bit of panic sets in, it's always interesting to see how people respond to these situations, because Dender as well have quite a shrewd sporting director. Julian Gorius is, I think, an underrated sporting director. He's done very well there, had a very good relationship with Vincent Everard. A lot of people expected him to go to Standard when he went there as well. And work under him, and he's really the mover and shaker at Dender. So it's an interesting choice. And all eyes on playoff 3, that relegation playoff now, which will start in a few weeks. You mentioned Circle there actually in this section as well. They're the one side possibly who probably do stand a chance of being able to escape that drop zone. Just because of their outputs, which we've highlighted, still kind of enough positives to hold on to an opportunity possibly to dig themselves out. So I can see why Joris was saying maybe there is still a chance there. They are underperforming, as we've highlighted. Their overall XG for the season is sitting at 41, and they've scored 34. So they're missing a lot of opportunities. Again, something we've highlighted, and their defence hasn't been good enough. Fourth best away side in the league, by the way, Circle, which isn't bad at all. So their away side has been pretty decent, but it's at home where they've just been hopeless actually all season. Only one win and 7 points through the entire season at home, which is just pretty extraordinary. You think about it. Obviously, most sides' form's better at home, but they seem to just be more relaxed playing away from home, which sides do sometimes. But yeah, they're the one side who I might hold out a slim chance of being able to kind of climb out kind of completely. And that win, obviously, this weekend against Rick de Mil's Ghent was, a little bit of a surprise. Rick de Mil saying afterwards that, if we harbour any real ambitions to be a playoff one side, then, losing games like this really isn't an option. And he's obviously still searching for some consistency there, and is a bit frustrated at the moment. But yeah, plenty to keep an eye on down at the bottom as ever.
Absolutely, yeah, and just kind of circling a little bit back to Dender, and then I'll add a bit to Circle as well. But it is funny you mentioned he was obviously at Zamalek, which is like the difference in expectations, atmosphere, the football culture to Dender is like it's chalk and cheese, isn't it? Like he's gonna feel like I can probably have a nap. Like it's going to be so much more peaceful. Because I think he started reasonably well with them, and then I mean, it always makes me laugh when like you see some of the names of the teams. Like obviously, if you know about Egypt and football, you know about Zamalek, you know about Al Ahly. In recent years, Pyramids FC, who are just basically like the money team, who have like no fans, but just buy everything. But then you see like he got sacked. I was looking it up. He got sacked after 1-1 draw with the National Bank. And it's like, how are you going to beat the National Bank? Like, surely, how's that possible? Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, this is a rabbit hole that I'm going to pursue. But who supports the National Bank? Like, who's like, I'm going to support the National Bank of Egypt as my team? If you're listening to this podcast and you know a National Bank of Egypt fan, let me know. It's like teams when I follow other leagues, there's like Police FC or something like that. I'm like, who supports Police FC or Prison FC? And I think it's in Tanzania. There's a couple of these teams. Like, I get supporting Zamalek, but I couldn't imagine supporting the bank. Like that just blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. But it's very, very interesting, like how that all happens. So yeah, if you are a National Bank fan, let me know why. I'd love to get inside your head and see how that decision was made, because someone must support them. Like it can't just be the people that work there all turning out every week to support them. But yeah, amazing. So he's obviously come from there, had a couple of months off, and now is coming into Dender, which is it's a completely different situation, different kettle of fish. Completely, he'll be much more used to it, and it's kind of no, you can't really lose, can you? Like if things don't massively improve, you can be like, oh, "That's fine. I've literally just turned up. Like we'll go again next year. If they get relegated, they get relegated. They may sack him if they get relegated. I don't know. It seems bizarre for all the reasons you pointed out, Scott, about what he can do in the second tier. Obviously, didn't do it with Molenbeek, but like, yeah, the less
It's
said
worth.
about kind of that
I was
situation.
thinking when Yannick Ferreira's name came up this afternoon, I was thinking, of course, that he comes, of course, from a reasonably well-known footballing dynasty, shall we say, because his uncle is a certain Emilio Ferreira who has been absolutely everywhere. These days, he's the T1 Crossing Schaarbeek, who I think are they in the third tier? Or the fourth tier even. Anyway, they're in the amateur tiers of Belgian football these days. But, Emilio Ferreira, Yannick's uncle, has been absolutely everywhere. You know, Looking at this today, actually, he's been at Lokeren, he's been at Club, he's been at Genk, he's been at Dender, he's been at Leuven, he's worked at Neerpede, he's been at Standard, he's been at Serang, of course, he's been at Young Gent. He's been absolutely everywhere. This is a family who have, deep ties to Belgian football and will pretty much take on any challenge. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's probably quite a good appointment. And you can always have Uncle Emilio on speed dial for a bit of advice because he's certainly had enough practice in the game.
He's been at clubs that don't exist anymore. His career is absolutely wild, isn't it? Like there's a couple of like late 2000, late kind of noughties where he spent a bit of time in Greece, just bouncing around a couple of those teams. That must have been a nice couple of years in the sun. Although was that during a financial crash in Greece, so maybe it wasn't as lovely as it probably looks on paper. But yeah, very very interesting, isn't it? Like everyone loves a journeyman manager that bounces around like that. I mean, don't want to kind of dwell on it too much. Just jumping back to Cercle Bruges, but again, it shows that their decision to stick with NSNL is really, really against the grain. It's against kind of everything that's happening in modern football, and I think it's a direct kind of lesson learned from last season sacking Muslic, but I don't necessarily think you can kind of equate the two because what Muslic did was remarkable, and Muslic was good from the get go. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, I'd have been intrigued to see what he'd have been able to do with this team. I do think he would have done a good job with it. I know some fans of other clubs that have had him in recently may not agree, but any man that somehow is getting Schalke to look like they actually could go back up deserves credit because, yeah, speaking of chalk and cheese, like the pressure at Schalke is a lot higher than the pressure at Cercle Bruges. So he's done a fantastic job there. We wish him all the best. And yeah, I mean, it's looking really exciting down the bottom in terms of who's going to get out of that bottom four. Even though the jeopardy levels aren't actually that high, it's just, I think, the kind of what if we fall into there and suddenly everything explodes and everything goes horrendously wrong. So better to just completely avoid that, get into playoff two, and just enjoy yourselves in there and just kind of relax and start planning ahead for next season. And I think that's the main thing is that you can, if you're Leuven or Circle, and if you jump out of the bottom four, you can immediately start looking ahead to next season. If you're Leuven, you can start thinking about the players you're going to sign and how much you're going to sell them for in January. For Circle, you'll probably just sign a bunch of kids. But you need, I think, some experience will be needed. And I think they've shown that a little bit this year with signing like Gherkins and Van Zyl and something like that, that like maybe they are going to slightly pivot in that sense or go back because they had done it before. So maybe pivot a little bit back towards the combination of young and old players because they've lost. I think we could probably talk about this a little bit more another time, but like you had guys that had been there since they were kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, had like come through. Like Thibaut Sommers is the biggest example, but you'd also had Charles Van who'd been there for a long time coming through. Olivier Deman coming through. Like, I think it's hard to underestimate how important those guys actually were to kind of not just the squad in terms of like their quality and their understanding of the Belgian game, but I presume behind the scenes as well, they're quite important to like kind of helping people that are moving into the country and stuff to be like, this is how things happen, this is how things work, this is how the club operates, this is how it works, sort of thing. And I think can't underestimate how important that is. but so now having another year, I think that would really help if he goes into the summer and he can do that as well. Van der Bruggen's obviously been around long enough; he can kind of take on that mantle as well. So yeah, I have a soft spot for Saka, so I would like them to stay up because I've enjoyed kind of the project over the last couple of years. But I do think a bit more kind of practical approach to picking players up and doing that sort of thing is going to be needed after this season. I think they know that, and I think they will adapt to that. Leuven will wait and see what happens there. Zortavara game, I'm quite concerned about. They really are dropping like a stone, so it is going to be interesting. See what kind of Ferreira does. What impact does he have? Are they going to catch Raul, or is this just kind of too little, too late, and we're focusing on that playoff game? And yeah, like you said, I'm looking forward to that game, regardless of which of those four teams that we think are probably going to be get into it in the end. But it should be good. We've always spoken about Beveren. We've spoken a bit about Kortrijk. Anything else from the CPL, Scott, before we get out?
Nothing remarkable this week. Olympic Charleroi picked up another win, which is interesting. Which I suppose keeps them within a shout of possibly escaping the drop, which is kind of worth taking away, I think. But yeah, it's been quite a quiet week from a CPL point of view. Beveren aside, of course.
Great. No, that makes sense then. Well, hopefully Genk can do the business tomorrow against Dinamo Zagreb. They are 3-1 up. They played well in that first leg. They looked much the better team, so hopefully they can finish it off despite the 3-0 defeat to Stand Liège. So we can at least have one team left in Europe. That'd be quite nice to go into things. But apart from that, that's pretty much everything from the two of us this week. Hope everyone has a nice rest of your week. Hope you enjoyed the football this weekend. Scott, anything to add before I ask everyone to leave us reviews and give us money?
Well, we've been talking a lot about Beveren this week, and there'll be a little bit more on Beveren to come from me. I've got a long form piece coming on the Substack, which will be landing over the next couple of days. So a lot more on the background to their return, a lot more on some of the key figures inside the club as well, the Bob Peters and the Maren Creedykes and the Bart Foubers of this world as well. So yeah, if you're looking for an even deeper dive than we've already done this evening, then yeah, just to whet your appetite, there'll be more coming over the next couple of days.
Absolutely, and if you follow us on social media, you'll be getting links to that and repost to that, so you won't be able to miss it. If not, I'll put it in the show notes, so you can just head over there, subscribe, and then you'll get that straight to your email. It's so simple. If you've enjoyed this episode and enjoyed subsequent episodes, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. If you've already done that, I want to do a buy me a coffee, which really does help with the running of the podcast. You can do that as well. I'll also link that in the note description. I keep saying that over the last couple of weeks and I keep forgetting to do it. So this week I'm holding myself accountable to actually do it. Keep slipping to mind. Anyway, thanks as always for listening, and we will see you again very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.